This is the March 19th interview with Ruth Hawley. She's the daughter of John Lynch and Stella Stage Lynch, and she's talking about her memories of her parents in their early marriage and when they first got married. So now it's about your uncle, your brother Russell's been born, and you're a child. What are your first memories that you have of growing up together uh, in your family? It's on.
Oh,
Yes, it's on.
I'm making faces again.
It's on. So, what are your memories?
Oh, well, I'm daydreaming. I didn't realize I was supposed to be talking.
Yes, yes, just like
Uh,
always.
my first memories? Well, I remember being out on the farm at Weimar. That was another one of my father's pitfalls because he did very well when it came like dealing in car uh, dealerships and buying and selling land. He had 7 pieces of property of rentals there in Omaha before all this took off. Well, then he always undid himself by he had to be a farmer for some strange reason. Well, he's born and raised on one, but he had a natural affection to be a farmer, and it always undid him because he'd do something crazy. Well, he goes out to Blair, Nebraska, and he buys a farm, and he fences it so it's uh, a certain kind of fencing that was kept smaller animals like goats and things like that. Spent a fortune on it, on bringing the farm up to his ideas, and so we moved out there, and we had all sorts of livestock, and of course my mother, she didn't know anything which was right or wrong about finances. She born and raised and never had anything in the way of luxury, so everything was fine as far as she was concerned. So one day, uh, my father, I was with him, and he decided he wanted to go on his own, so he puts me in the yard with the house. There was a fence around it, and he heads for the barn. Well, there happened to be a nanny goat that was tethered out by the door, and I get too close to her. And I, of course, I was an innocent child. I'd try to pet her or pull her whiskers or do something, and she butted me and knocked me down. My mother was sitting in the kitchen reading. Well, she was always reading, or she she wasn't supposed to pay attention to anything, and she didn't. But she was sitting there reading, and she came to her dying day that there was a vision came across her page of her book, that the picture of this goat pounded me into the. I didn't know I was being killed. It was this nanny goat, and she it was strong enough vision that she gets up and goes to the door, and there was the exact scene that she had come across the page of her book. I was unconscious, and this nanny goat was pounding me into the dirt, and but she was tethered. Well, she screamed and she ran out and she picked me up and she screeched and howled. So my father came around to see what it was, and I was still unconscious. And well, Manny Goat didn't live very minutes after that. He whacked her over the head and killed her. Right now, that was his way of solving it. It took that to satisfy my mother because she wasn't going to have let the goat live after that. And that was a place called Blair, Nebraska.
How old were you around at that time?
I was probably 2 or 3.
Okay, so this is a story you remember being told, not one that you remember personally.
Well, I remember it.
Uh-huh.
I do remember it. Something like that will stick in a child's mind. Well, anyway, I remember we had just moved there, and Russell and my dad were going to go off someplace. We had a car, an old Model T Ford. So they took off, and I was so upset that I ran out on the road after them. I wanted to go with them. Well, I get out on the road, and guess what? Here comes a car with 2 men in it. I remember the 2 guys, and they stopped to get me out of the road, and they pulled me. They thought I belonged to the farm down, the next farm down. and they picked me up and dropped me off at the next farm. And my mother, of course, she's back in the house reading or doing something because she never, it wasn't up to her to take care of anything properly. And I was dropped off at the next door neighbor down the road, the next farm. And I remember all this that happened. And I remember playing out at the back door. The woman, then this woman, she gets on the phone, and she figured that she was smart enough to figure I probably came from the next farm. She knew it was vacant and thought, and it was correct. Then my father and mother came down and picked me up. That's how they got acquainted with their next door neighbor. And so I don't remember much after that.
What kind of games did you and your brother like to play?
Oh, we had a wagon that he'd pull me in. And I remember the wagon we'd coast down over the outdoor cave where we kept, it was run to in case of we had tornadoes. That part of the world has tornadoes. So we were in this wagon taking turns going down. Well, Russell gets in the wagon and he tips over and he breaks his arm. Tipping over. Didn't take much for him to do that because it wasn't much of a, I wasn't excited over it, but he was screaming and Stella ran and Russell was screaming, holding his arm. It was dangling. And she gets on the phone to call, I don't know, locate my father, call a doctor or what. So while she was on the phone, a hobo that was coming down the road, he decides he's going to come into the house. Well, this hobo, and I can remember all this, and I remember Russell was screaming, and she was on the phone, and she turns around, and there was a strange man in the kitchen with us, and she was so excited that she screamed at him, "What the hell are you doing here?" You know. And she did, and he was so much confusion going on that the hobo backed off, and he pointed to some old rubber inner tubes that were laying in a bushel basket there by the stove that for starting fires with, the cook stove. And he said he wanted those. Well, she said, take them and get out of here. and he left. He decided there was just too much excitement going on. That he didn't want any part of it.
And then, so you took your brother to the hospital or to the doctor and had the arm set.
Oh yeah, they had to have his arm set.
Mm-hmm.
He broke his arm going down off of this top of this cave that was next to the house.
And you guys are just playing.
Yeah, and he hit something that tipped him over in the wagon.
Okay.
And threw him out of the wagon.
Okay. Well, that's all we have time for on this interview. So we'll talk more in the next one.